The committee will come to order. Pursuant to notice, the committee meets this morning to mark up H.R. 2699, the Peace Corps Volunteer Service Improvement Act, and H.R. 2337, the Kate Pusey Peace Corps Volunteer Protection Act. As our members are aware, these reform measures enjoy strong bipartisan support, and they are competing markups taking place in other committees this morning. Thus, as your offices were notified earlier this week, it is the intent of the chair to consider these bills en bloc and by unanimous consent, including the substitute amendments sent to you on Monday and the 5 brief amendments sent to you yesterday. All members have copies of those documents before them. Then, after we have concluded our expedited consideration, I will be glad to recognize myself, the ranking member, Judge Poe, and any other member who wishes to make statements on these measures. All members are giving leave to insert written remarks into the record should they choose to do so. And seeing that a reporting quorum is present, without objection, the following measures are considered as read. The chairman is authorized to seek consideration of the following bills under suspension of the rules, and the following amendments to those bills which the members have before them shall be deemed adopted. H.R. 2699, the Peace Corps Volunteer Service Improvement Act. Ros-Lehtinen Amendment 87 to H.R. 2699, which is the amendment in the nature of a substitute provided to your offices on Monday, and Amendment 35 to that amendment offered by Ms. Wilson of Florida, and it's been a delight to have been working with you, Ms. Wilson. Thank you for your good suggestions on the bills. H.R. 2337, the Kate Pusey Peace Corps Volunteer Protection Act. The Poe Amendment 178 to H.R. 2337, which is the amendment in the nature of a substitute sent to your offices on Monday, and the following amendments to that Amendment 178, Amendment 179 offered by Judge Poe, and Amendments 30, 33, and 34 offered by Ms. Wilson of Florida. Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The amendments and the amended bills are adopted. Without objection, the staff is directed to make technical and conforming changes. Now that we have completed formal consideration of these measures, I will recognize members for remarks. I have some remarks, but let me just turn first to the ranking member and Judge Poe and any others who seek recognition. My good friend from California, Mr. Berman, is recognized.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and thank you for a number of things in terms of dealing with this legislation. I think this marks an important step towards improving the safety and security of volunteers that serve in the Peace Corps. We took up the issue of volunteer safety earlier this year after the broadcast of an extremely disturbing report on the ABC News program 2020. The segment detailed the experiences of a number of young volunteers who were sexually assaulted while serving overseas, but didn't receive the care and support they needed from the Peace Corps. The show also examined the circumstances surrounding the death of Kate Pusey, a volunteer in the West African country of Benin, who was murdered after reporting that a fellow teacher was sexually abusing some of his students. In May, we held a very useful hearing on these issues under your leadership with witnesses that included returned volunteers who were survivors of sexual assault, the Inspector General of the Peace Corps, and the Peace Corps Director. The testimony we received from the survivors and the Inspector General provided very concrete suggestions on ways to improve the Peace Corps, which we have done our best to incorporate into these bills. These include requiring the Peace Corps to have comprehensive policies and training for volunteers and staff on risk reduction and response, the establishment of a victim support office to focus exclusively on supporting victims of sexual assault and other crimes, and completing a memorandum of understanding between the Peace Corps and the State Department clarifying security-related responsibilities. To his credit, the Peace Corps Director, Aaron Williams, detailed the steps the agency is already taking to improve support for victims of sexual assault and other crimes, and what he told us was very encouraging. The Peace Corps has already hired a victims advocate. established a confidentiality policy, and started the process of rewriting and updating their sexual assault risk reduction and response policies and training. These bills codify some of the important measures that Director Williams has put in place to ensure they are retained by future directors. At the hearing, I suggested that what we needed to do was some good old-fashioned oversight, gathering facts, asking the tough questions, developing a responsible bipartisan approach to fix any problems we find. And that's what you've done with this work on the Peace Corps bills. We've gotten valuable input from the NGOs, advocacy groups, our partners in the Senate, and the Peace Corps. The result is a comprehensive, balanced bill that will make the Peace Corps a better organization for all of its volunteers and its partner countries. Madam Chairman, this is a model for how the legislative process is supposed to work, and I'd truly like to thank both you and Mr. Poe and your staffs for involving us with you in developing these important issues. On its 50th anniversary, Peace Corps continues to perform a vital role in promoting community-based development in some of the world's poorest countries, sharing American values, enriching our own nation by bringing knowledge of other countries and cultures back to the United States. No agency with such a modest budget has done more than the Peace Corps to extend America's presence in every part of the world. None has enjoyed such bipartisan support. These bills will strengthen the Peace Corps and help ensure the agency can continue to do its important work well into the future, and I urge my colleagues to support these pieces of legislation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Berman. The chair recognizes herself for her statement. I'd like to thank the ranking member, Mr. Berman, for his support and his cooperation in a bipartisan manner on this timely issue. Versions of both of these bills were adopted by our committee as Title 10 of H.R. 2583, the Foreign Relations Authorization Act, and not a single one of the 84 amendments offered to the authorization bill altered the Peace Corps provision. So it's important that Congress act now to put in place the protections contained in the two bills before us. I'd like to thank Ms. Lois Pusey, the mother of Kate Pusey. I'd like to thank Dr. Karistan Conan, Jessica Smochek, and Carol Clark, who were so brave in their testimony before our committee. They were deeply inspiring, and our committee is committed to making sure that their voices are heard loud and clear. And now it's my pleasure to recognize the author of H.R. 2337, Judge Poe, for his remarks on these measures. And my complete statement, as well as everyone's complete statement, as I said in the beginning, will be inserted in the record. Judge Poe is recognized.
I want to thank the chairman for her great work on this legislation and the ranking member, and the chairman for holding this markup today. I first became aware of this tragic mistreatment of some volunteers in the Peace Corps when I met with victims last fall. They talked about how the Peace Corps in some areas had a culture of blaming the victim when a crime was committed against the victim. Let me be clear, when a victim or a person is raped, they are the victim of the crime, and it's never their fault. The crime is always the fault of the perpetrator, never the victim. And over the next few months after these first meetings, the media confirmed what victims had been telling me, that these were not just one or two isolated cases. The cases were representative of a problem that the Peace Corps was having. So suddenly I started hearing from Peace Corps volunteers previously and present who were mistreated by Peace Corps, those that had been with the Peace Corps and had left the Peace Corps, and those that were currently in the Peace Corps. One thing I want to make perfectly clear, I'm a big supporter of the Peace Corps. It does a great service for this nation. It's one of the best things that we have ever invented, but we need to fix some of the problems that are in the Peace Corps. After meeting with numerous victims, I met with the Peace Corps Director, Aaron Williams, in February, and I have a meeting with him again tomorrow. It appeared to me that he understood this issue, and he was open to suggestions on how it could be solved and how Peace Corps victims could be protected overseas. He has taken some important steps toward reform. He's hired a Peace Corps First Victim Advocate in May to help support volunteers who were sexually assaulted or physically assaulted. But it's important for Congress to stand behind Director Williams and give him the power to change the culture in the Peace Corps beyond his tenure. That's what the Kate Pusey Peace Corps Volunteer Protection Act of 2011 does. It has four main parts. It requires, number one, the Peace Corps to follow best practices in the area of sexual assault, in the sexual assault field. Two, it sets up an Office of Victim Advocacy to help victims receive services. Three, it puts an advisory council in place to review the Peace Corps sexual assault policy and implementation. And four, it establishes new confidentiality requirements, including a system of restricted and unrestricted reporting for victims. My amendment to the bill has some minor changes that do not change the substance of the bill. For example, we clarify the guidelines of the restricted and unrestricted reporting system, and they are to be drawn up by the Peace Corps. The bill has strong support of the former Peace Corps victims, and as the chairman has testified, or as mentioned, several of them have testified before this committee. So being supported by victims and survivors, including the brave advocacy groups, First Response Action, also RAIN supports this legislation. RAIN is the nation's largest anti-sexual violence organization, and the National Peace Corps Association supports this legislation. We do have one of the victims who came and talked to me and others on this committee about her encounters in the Peace Corps with us today. Jess Smochek is in the audience, and I want to thank her for being here and being supportive, and being, of course, at the Senate when the Senate was marking up this legislation. And thank her and all the other victims who have testified and brought information to this committee. I also want to thank the 15 of my colleagues on the committee that co-sponsored the bill, the chairman, the ranking member, Ms. Bass, Ms. Burkle, Mr. Burton, Mr. Shabbat, Mr. Connolly, Mr. Deutsch, Mr. Falamaega, Mr. Payne, Mr. Rivera, Mr. Rohrabacher, Ms. Smith, Ms. Cyrus, Mr. Cyrus, and Ms. Wilson. I'd also like to call the Peace Corps volunteers and thank them for what they do abroad. I have used the phrase that they are the American angels abroad. They actually are doing that. They are the best ambassadors we have for this nation. And they go off to remote corners of the world, far away from their families and the conveniences of the United States, and they go to help other people. And what a great service they do to protect the reputation of the United States, and they are the best ambassadors we have for this country. And so for many years, it appears to me that in this area of supporting them when they are assaulted, we have failed them, and now it's time for Congress to act and make sure that we right this wrong and protect our Peace Corps victims no matter where they are. And thank you, Madam Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you for your leadership on this issue, Judge Poe. Do other members seek recognition? Ms. Wilson is recognized.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you for this legislation, and thank you, Judge Poe, and thank you, Ranking Member Berman. I sincerely appreciate your acceptance and support of the 4 amendments I submitted today. I think it is of the utmost importance that we do everything in our power to ensure the safety of Peace Corps volunteers, particularly when we are discussing crimes as serious as sexual assault. An infringement on one's personhood is unforgivable and irreversible. An attack of that nature is accompanied by silent ghost victims. These victims will carry that with them for the rest of their lives. Unfortunately, many prospective volunteers do not fully realize the potential dangers that await them in their new service areas. Let me say this. I love the Peace Corps. It is essential, it is effective, and it should be expanded. It is an example of all that is right with American foreign policy. Let me also say that the bills passed here today will go a long way toward ensuring the safety of our nation's youth who volunteer the best years of their lives. But we could go further. I wish to offer another amendment today, but I could not garner sufficient support for its passage. But that's okay. My amendment simply would have closed nations to the placement of Peace Corps members if they are repeatedly the largest perpetrators of sexual assault on our young men and women. Further, failing to prosecute reported assaults would lead to the barring of Peace Corps members as well. I'm not naive. I realize the message this would send to those nations affected, and that message needs to be sent. I refuse to stand by and do nothing. I refuse to watch as bad actors continue on in the very manner we are trying to address. But I promise it is an issue around which I will continue to fight. Thank you for allowing me to make this statement, and thank you to the committee for all of the wonderful work you have done. Let us stay vigilant, let us stay strong, and let us stay secure. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you so much, and I thank the gentlelady from Florida for her valuable contributions in her amendments to this bill. It has made it stronger, provided greater safeguards for our Peace Corps volunteers. Every one of her amendments improved the bill, and we don't give up on us yet. We're still working on the other issues that I know are still unresolved. Do any other members seek recognition or to make a statement on the bill? Seeing no additional hands up or hearing no additional requests to speak, I would like to thank all of our members for their cooperation. Just so arriving members are clear, the committee had already adopted the bills and bipartisan amendments sent to your offices earlier this week and concluded our formal presentation. So at this point, I was just recognizing members who would like to make a statement, but you feel free to put in your statement as part of the record. And thank all of you for your cooperation. And with that, the committee stands adjourned. Thank you.